to get a pimped out ride.
You've got to pimp my ride.
Pimp My Ride for the PlayStation 2 is a fascinating relic from the mid-2000s gaming era, where the blending of TV franchises and video games was at its peak. Developed by Eutechnyx, a UK-based studio that also developed the ill-fated Ride to Hell, Retribution, this game was released on November 21, 2006, in the US and later on December 1, 2006, in Europe. With a development history tied to a studio known for both racing games and a later infamous action title, the game promised to bring the loud, flashy world of MTV's Pimp My Ride into players' living rooms. However, the execution fell far short of expectations. To fully appreciate the oddity that is Pimp My Ride for the PS2, it helps to understand a bit more about Eutechnyx. By the time this game was released, the studio had a history of developing racing titles. Their resume included a few well-received games, but it was always marked by a certain inconsistency in quality. A few years after Pimp My Ride, Eutechnyx released Ride to Hell, Retribution in 2013, a game so notoriously terrible that it has become a standard reference in discussions about the worst games of all time. The same developmental shortcomings that would plague Ride to Hell can already be seen taking root in Pimp My Ride, with its awkward design choices, uneven gameplay, and bizarre focus on minigames rather than offering a cohesive experience. The premise of Pimp My Ride is simple: take the flashy, over-the-top vehicle customization from the hit MTV show and translate it into an interactive medium. On the surface, this is a great idea. The show, hosted by rapper Exhibit, revolved around transforming people's dilapidated cars into extravagant, blinged-out machines. Each episode was an exercise in absurdity, with mechanics installing everything from neon lights to fish tanks inside vehicles. Fans of the show naturally expected a game version that would focus heavily on customization, giving players full creative control over building the most ridiculous cars possible.
Unfortunately, Pimp My Ride doesn't quite live up to this potential. What might have worked better as a game focused entirely on customization or a business simulation, allowing players to run their own garage and take on a variety of clients, turns into a strange hodgepodge of genres, including bizarre driving sequences, awkward minigames, and an attempt to shoehorn in the urban aesthetic that was popular in the mid-2000s. Development of Pimp My Ride started as MTV was looking to capitalize on the massive popularity of the show, which aired from 2004 to 2007. By 2006, urban-themed games such as Def Jam, Fight for NY and Need for Speed Underground were big hits, and Pimp My Ride seemed like an ideal fit to ride that wave. Eutechnyx, which had some experience with vehicle-based games, was selected as a developer. Given that the studio was based in the UK, one might expect a certain distance between their understanding of American urban culture and how it played out in the show. That distance becomes glaringly obvious in the final product, released near the tail end of the PS2's life cycle, November 2006 in North America and December 2006 in Europe. The game arrived at a time when the console was already inundated with open-world and urban-themed titles. Despite the booming market for such games, Pimp My Ride felt like a rushed project, an attempt to quickly capitalize on a soon-to-fade cultural phenomenon.
There are many attempts within Pimp My Ride to mirror other successful games of the time. It draws parallels to Need for Speed Underground with its customization focus, but the execution is much less polished. It also bears similarities to the Urbs Sims in the City, another game that tried to tap into the mid-2000s urban vibe. However, while the Urbs had the backing of the Sims' solid game mechanics, Pimp My Ride lacks that foundation. It offers a mishmash of underdeveloped elements, from uninspired driving segments to unengaging and frankly bizarre minigames. It never manages to find a cohesive gameplay loop. In terms of being faithful to the show, Pimp My Ride tries, but misses the mark in a variety of ways. The real draw of the show was the transformation of the cars and the personalities of the mechanics in Exhibit. While the game features a digitized version of Exhibit, his in-game character is lifeless, spouting repetitive lines with little charm. The game lacks the personality and humor that made the show enjoyable. Moreover, while customization is a central feature, it's surprisingly limited. You can't truly create the outrageous monstrosities that the show was known for. The range of options is shallow, and what should have been the game's strongest point, its customization mechanics, feels undercooked. Players are given a limited selection of parts and accessories, and the process feels less like a creative endeavor and more like a checklist of bling items to make the car look slightly more outlandish. There is no real depth to the customization system, which is a shame considering how much potential the concept had.
One of the most puzzling aspects of Pimp My Ride is its reliance on bizarre minigames. These range from rhythm-based games where you perform to earn money for your car customizations, to odd driving segments where you hype up neighborhoods by driving through them while blaring your car horn. The animations for these segments are laughably bad, with stiff character models and awkward movements that only highlight how strange the gameplay is. These minigames do little to enhance the overall experience and often feel like obvious padding. It's as if the developers realized that the core customization mechanics weren't enough to sustain a full game, so they added a collection of uninspired tasks to fill time. The result is a gameplay experience that feels both disjointed and tedious. It's clear that Pimp My Ride was an attempt to capitalize on the trends of its time. The early to mid-2000s saw a boom in games featuring urban culture. From street racing to hip-hop themed brawlers, Pimp My Ride tries desperately to slot into this genre, but it feels forced. The urban elements of the game, graffiti, hip-hop soundtracks, and street slang, feel tacked on, rather than an organic part of the experience. It's as if the developers were checking boxes, rather than creating something with its own identity.
The reliance on urban theming might have worked better if it had been paired with deeper gameplay mechanics, particularly around the business of car customization. Imagine a game where you could run your own garage, work with clients, manage budgets, and truly express creativity in your designs. Instead, Pimp My Ride gives you a surface-level experience that barely scratches the potential of its premise. Another major flaw in Pimp My Ride is its uninspired setting. The game's open-world environment is supposed to represent a bustling urban landscape, but the reality is far from exciting. The streets are empty, the buildings are dull, and the overall sense of life that you might expect from a game set in a vibrant city is entirely absent. Driving through the game's various neighborhoods feels like a chore, and there's little to do in the open-world segments aside from the aforementioned repetitive minigames. In the end, Pimp My Ride for the PS2 is a strange relic of a bygone era of gaming, one that tried to capitalize on a popular trend of vehicular prostitution and the like, but ended up missing the mark entirely. Unless you have a strong attachment to the show and a high tolerance for awkward mechanics, it's a game that's best left in the past.